Live from the Man Cave, treadmills and tangents with Coach Aaron Saron and his army of wellness warriors. Live in discussion of all things health and wellness, along with community topics they happen to stumble upon.
And good morning, Omaha. Coach coming at you live from the Man Cubby. I got Tim here with us today.
Good morning, Omaha.
I'm excited, guys. We got the super surgeon, Brad Winterstein, is here with us. Bariatric surgeon over at Methodist. I'm really excited because Dr. Brad was just out at the Lo-Carb Conference out in Colorado, correct?
No, this one was in San Diego.
Oh, San Diego, even better.
Yeah, it was nice.
Nothing against Colorado. But...
Well, there is one in Denver coming up, I think, in March or something like that. So probably hit that one too.
Right on. So as you guys know, anybody that's listened to us, we're big on the ketogenic diet and the understanding of a low-carb diet. But we're going to get some information right from the source. And Dr. Brad was just out there, top surgeons from around the world and speakers talking about low-carb. And interesting enough, but I'll tell you that most of the people there were actually carnivore.
Yeah, that was a little surprising to me. I mean, there's been a little bit of buzz around the carnivore diet for a while now, and you know, they had January of this year was kind of the carnivore month, and a lot of people tried it. And I was surprised that probably a good 1/3 of the people that were at the conference, probably 100 people or so, total were, it was 300 people, were carnivore.
And these are doctors and surgeons and specialists in the fields.
I would say there's about 1/3 were medical professionals. The other 1/3 were researchers or just lay people trying to get healthy.
Right on. So let's back up a little bit. So the difference between carnivore and the quote unquote ketogenic diet, because they can be the same, but not necessarily. Like they both can get you to the state of ketosis. But carnivore is actually almost taking it a step further.
It is. I think the carnivore is as it sounds. It's basically a meat-based approach to getting into ketosis, and in that result, you can't have really lean meats. And so, when people start out, they do a lot of different types of meats, but they'll find that most people start favoring towards beef or some of the fattier porks because, like chicken or even pork shoulder doesn't tend to have enough fat for you, and it's awful lean.
Well, most poultries in general tend to be lean, and then some of the gamier meats like deer and bison and elk tend to be leaner as well. So actually the fattier cuts, the marbling, which anybody that's cooked steaks knows for a long time, the marbling is where all the flavor is. So let me ask you this. We understand the ketogenic diet, ketosis, the body's burning ketones, vice carbs for the main energy source. But it's a continuum, right? I don't want to get people confused that, low carb necessarily means ketosis at the same time.
It doesn't. I mean, you can be a lower carb dieter and not get into ketosis. There's several things that can make it so you don't, whether that's your sleep patterns, you might be eating too much protein, and that can make sure you're not in ketosis. And so I still think lower carb is beneficial. I think being in ketosis has its own benefits. And then, the carnivore is just another adaptation to that if you do it correctly and make sure you're getting, the enough fats in your diet, you can definitely be in ketosis. And I know some people, and I've talked to a lot of people, that it is just that step above.
Right, it's taken to the next step. So there's a lot of benefit in being low carb. There's benefit in being ketosis. There's benefit in perhaps even being carnivore. But it's not for everybody. Is that safe to say?
I totally agree. I mean, if you're eating a standard American diet, high carb, and think that you're just going to go carnivore, you're sadly mistaken. That you're going to feel like you're terrible, and not.
You can say crap. That's all right.
Yeah,
I feel like
not necessarily do well with it, and think that you failed. And it takes a adaptation. That's why I think that it's the step above. You have to go low carb, primal, paleo type-ish thing. Then if you want to go to ketosis, and then from there you should probably try yourself at carnivore.
Right, I love it. So before we confuse so many people, so people that are listening that are having issues with their weight or maybe carrying more body fat than they want to, the first step is just to start to lower your carb intake and get your body, which is really, the whole goal is to get your body's insulin response and insulin levels back to a healthy state.
True. That can be done, first of all is going low carb, and that's not just in what you eat, it's what you drink, and the other things are, how much you eat. If you're eating 6 meals a day and it's still low carb, you're still stimulating your insulin response, 6 times a day throughout the day. And so those are other little practices, like when I talk to some of my patients about this, is those, where are we going to, start with,
Yeah, so start with the basics. Just get rid of the sugars, the obvious things, and then maybe start backing off on the fruits and the fruit juices, and then we can get cosmic and start talking maybe ketogenic and carnivore diets.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you don't know what your protein is, if you think you get most of your protein from your vegetables, we have to start somewhere else.
Right, we got to start with the basics. Now, Tim has lost a ton of weight on what he calls lazy keto.
Lazy keto.
Which
makes Dr. Brad laugh, I'm sure.
Well, but it still starts.
Yeah, it's...
Right, so basically, tell everybody how you started out on it.
So I first started keto because at the gym, Aaron had himself, and then a few people were trying it out. And I was like, there's no way I'm giving up carbs. Like, you guys are out of your freaking mind.
What really happened was we did a month of challenge. I was like, hey, let's see who can get to let's do the ketogenic diet for a month. And the whole goal is really just get everybody to clean up their diet. Like, I didn't think anybody would get to the state of ketosis or ketogenic diet, but some people went full on and went hog wild into it.
And there were 2 or 3 people. Cam from the gym was one that was really getting into it hard. Amanda has been done it for a while, and so that really, I think, remotivated her. Heather was another person that kind of started. So after a couple of weeks, just kind of watched them. I'm like, all right, these guys are really starting to see some stuff. And then my son was born. So while I'm in the hospital waiting, for that whole process, I'm kind of texting some people. So I started the day he was born. I was like, that's it. Like, I'm all in. And I'm a kind of person that when I decide to do something, like, that's it. So we had meal prepped for a month worth of food at home, threw it all away. We didn't eat it because it was very, very potato heavy, rice heavy, a lot of that stuff. And so I do lazy keto because I did Weight Watchers for years and I've counted everything and I've done it all. And I just can't. If I have to count, I'll start to just sabotage myself because I don't want to do it.
Exactly.
So this became like, I was just staying under 20 carbs was my goal. I was looking at everything. I was being careful with my fats to make sure I got more. Careful not to get too much protein. But that's why I call it lazy keto, because a lot of these guys are super strict in they do macros and they're counting every bit of everything. And I've seen in some groups where people are losing 100 pounds in 3 months, which is crazy. So I've lost doing lazy keto about 110 pounds, and it took me about 10 months to do it.
But I think that's the right approach too, because like you said, what will sabotage you, and if you're counting everything. And by the way, I'm not a counter either, and we can maybe talk about what I'm doing now in a little bit. But I take that approach with most of my patients too that have done their Weight Watchers and things. Is like, do not set yourself up for failure. If you're going to read something, look at the carbs. Don't worry about the calories. If you have weight to lose, it will come off. We just need to lower your insulin levels, get your carbs down more than anything.
And I think one thing to keep in mind, and I had a discussion with Joe Westland, which we all know, I call him Mr. CrossFit. But when I was talking to him about, he works for CrossFit Health now, it's a division of CrossFit, and we were always talking about nutrition and whatnot. And I always ask him, well, I eat some carbs, and he would go, but Aaron, you're not obese.
Yeah.
He goes, you can do that. So not everybody has to be at the same level of carb intake. You can eat some more carbs. Your body fat is perpetually at 10%. So so your diet for you is going to allow you to eat some carbs. People that are obese, however you want to define obese, having more body fat than they want, are diabetic, can't necessarily afford to do that.
Exactly. I mean, and not only that, but I, saw a patient this week that has lost a considerable amount of weight, probably well over 100 and some pounds, and she started doing CrossFit, and she's doing it 5 times a day, 5 times a week. And,
it's like, whoa, man.
Yeah.
I don't know what she does for a living, but holy smokes.
That's a trooper.
But 5 times a week, and she's feeling tired at the end of the day, or by Thursday, Friday, she can barely get up, and Saturday she sleeps all day, basically. And my first thought was, well, you need more carbs. You're in ketosis.
She's like,
oh, exactly. So I said, let's try it for a couple of weeks. Let me know how it goes. But just add a little sweet potato in. Do something like that. I bet, you'll start getting a little bit. Or, you're in your 40s. Maybe a rest day is needed.
Shocker,
you're overtraining.
Sure.
And so those are the things that you have to look about.
I think people have that. There's a friend of mine that I've been helping a little bit with some of the stuff, and she sent me something the other day that said, "You think I train too much?" And I was like, well, what do you do? She's like, "I do morning and night, Monday through Friday. Usually do something Saturday and something Sunday." Yeah. Probably. You're tired all the time? Yeah. Weight's not coming off like you think it should? Yeah. Your diet's clean? So you can do too much. You can overtrain your body at that point. I think it's into a point where it's like anything you eat, it's like I'm storing as much of this as I can because it's perpetually in that state where you're working so hard.
Well, and it's also stressed, and that'll bring your cortisol up, and then probably she's up at night and looking at her phone, and so she's not sleeping. That goes to our blue blockers. And
did you ever get those blue blockers? By the way,
I did not.
All right. We had an episode where he was going to order.
I brought that up first, and you looked it up, and then I heard the episode.
It's on my wish list. It's on my Amazon wish list.
All right. Oh, there we go. But yeah, so I mean, those are all little things that can sabotage a great diet and exercise too. And so it really matters, all of those little minutia things if you're failing.
Let's get to. I want to get to the conference. I want to hear what you took from the conference, and if there's any big mind blowing light bulb moments. So essentially, what's happening now is the science is finally catching up. The science is starting to debunk dogma, as you once called it, that, hey, all right, our traditional food pyramid is completely upside down, that we don't need the 6 to 10 to 12 servings of grains per day as we once thought, that maybe we need much, much less than that, if any at all. So now we're starting to see the science and the longer term studies are starting to show up to help support this. So you go to this low-carb conference, and just knowing you, I'm sure with an open mind, say, hey, what's going on out there? What was the big hitter you took away from it?
I knew a lot of the speakers coming in, and I've been following them, whether it's online or podcasts or reading some of their research a little bit. But what really hit me is that, at least in my practice, that maybe I've been asking people to do too much protein, which could be a problem, for not only health reasons but weight loss reasons, which can be a problem. But the other thing is that the second day was probably my favorite day, because there's a cardiologist out in San Diego. His name is Dr. Brett Shear. That he's called himself low-carb cardiologist, and totally debunks that LDLs absolutely have to go down if you're eating a good diet, a low-carb diet, and...
So what we're referring to there is your ratio to HDLs, LDLs, and
total cholesterol.
It's long been thought that your HDL should be high, your LDL should be low. That's a sign of a good cholesterol balance and a sign that you won't have heart disease or any type of artery issues, correct?
Exactly. And then right before his talk, there was a duo that they wrote a book, Eat Fat, Get Healthy, or something like that.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
You really need. These guys
I hope
are great.
there's a picture of bacon on the front.
I'll do a photo shoot with bacon if we have to. I mean, we can help out.
So this is Ivor Cummings. He's a computer engineer more than anything else. From Ireland.
All right. It's definitely up Tim's alley.
That is up my alley.
And he's from Ireland, and he kind of had the similar thing, and he took LDL as well as this Dave Feldman. He's also a computer engineer. They've looked at the cholesterol and kind of reversed engineered and looked at it from why is there LDL, and worked backwards and said, well, why would the body put this in our system if it wasn't healthy? And yes, if you're eating high, bad fats and high carbs, those things will be a problem because your LDL will be up, and then that does tend to cause some inflammatory things, and then that leads to, plaque buildup in the arteries. But they're also saying that if we can avoid that inflammation from carbohydrates, you don't have to really worry about that. You worry about your ratio. You got to make sure your triglycerides are down, all of those things. And so many people that are on these statin drugs may not need to unless if their diet is good.
So it comes back to we can cure with diet. We can definitely prevent, but now we can start to cure with diet.
We can definitely slow progression if it's already there. That's for sure. Cure, I think diabetes. You can definitely reverse type 2 diabetes. There was a lot of talk about even some type 1 diabetes being much better off on a keto type diet, and that was from actually a surgeon that does bariatric surgery out on the East Coast, and he had a wonderful talk about that as well, that how he treats his type 1 diabetics.
Wow, that's huge.
And that's rare for people to talk about, you know.
What and there's even research now in which cancer treatment is starting to turn towards a ketogenic diet because it makes, if nothing else, it makes the effects of the treatment, especially chemo, more effective at lower doses.
Yes. There was a wonderful talk about that. A lady that at 19 years of age, she was going through medical, or getting ready to go through, she was pre-med, diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer, which is almost, you can maybe live with it for a while, but it's stage 4 ovarian. It's not great prognosis long term. She's probably in her mid 40s now. She did not end up going to medical school, but she's I can't remember what her actual title is, but she's a naturopath for the basics, and she had a wonderful talk, and it was interesting because I was listening to Dr. Shear's podcast with her on it, not knowing who she was, as I'm flying out to San Diego, because that was the next one, and then I meet her, and she had the best talk. The name of her talk was Restoring Our Rhythm, Mistletoe, Moonbathing, and Marijuana. And so
all at once?
Well,
that's quite the soiree.
That's a party. That's a party right there.
Exactly. And so that was just strategies on thriving in the modern times is what she called it. And so, obviously people stayed and listened, but then once you heard her story, surviving cancer and doing some of these things, but yes, a ketogenic diet and maybe some fasting around the time of your chemotherapy, and then also the timing of your chemotherapy, like in the morning or in the afternoon, tends to show better outcomes over time.
How many, in your opinion, how many conferences like this is it going to take before we start to see a widespread acceptance of, the carbs, the grains, it's killing us?
So this is the third year of Low Carb San Diego. They also started doing, I think, one in Florida in the winter time. Low carb. It used to be Vail and then Steamboat, and this year they're moving it to Denver. Is there? But I think the biggest thing, if all of the talks were great, the biggest thing that we did at this Low Carb Conference in San Diego this time was. There's a guy named Gary Tobbs. He came out and he talked, and he's been working this for a long time, but we finally decided we'd sit down and we're going to try to make a standard of care for the low carb, high fat, or ketogenic diets in the clinical setting. Because without the standard of care, it can be scary to practice the way I do, because I'm at times going against some of the what we'd call protocols, or if your cholesterol's here, you need this medication, don't change your diet, those types of things. And so it definitely, if there's a standard of care, then we can proceed to saying, okay, this is a community of doctors that agree with this portion, and once that happens, now I can talk to my dietitians in the hospital and we can make a ketogenic formula or a low carb formula, which is really tough to do in the hospital setting right now because of the national guidelines.
So 2 things I want to hit on there. How often you butt heads with the traditional dietitians? Because I have to believe that, and I don't want to say they're still stuck in the old dogma, but like you said, the national guidelines very much are. And sometimes their hands are tied. As much as they may want to follow a protocol that is ketogenic, they're probably not allowed to in many cases, I would imagine.
Yeah, I wouldn't say butt heads anymore. I mean, they're coming on board, but again, from what they have to do, they have to follow these guidelines. And so a couple months ago, it was dietitian month or something, and they all got to come up with a new meal or serving at the cafeteria. And one of the dietitians that are the inpatient, she came up with a low carbohydrate meal, and we talked about it. It was really good, but she had to call it gluten free.
Oh, that's an acceptable term.
That's acceptable. That's because that's for people with celiac disease and stuff. So if you're gluten free, that's fine. It just so happened it was low carb.
One of our running jokes here is you go into Hy-Vee and you see Dietitian's Choice sticker on a package of pound cake.
Yes,
because it says fat free on it.
Yep.
But we know it's loaded with carbs and sugar.
Yeah.
So there's the play on words. I know confuses a lot of people because it's like, well, what's healthy now? Like first you tell me fat free, then you tell me no fat, sugar, carbs. Like what? We came up with an idea of doing buddy shopping in here, of stores having people in there to help you shop. And like, okay, what is really healthy? What really? And it's very subjective. But when people see Dietitian's Choice on a package of pound cake, some people believe that. Okay, well, the dietitian said it's okay. Let's get it.
Yeah. It is. It's crazy. I mean, that's I can do conversations with people in the office, and my nurse practitioner works with them, and we talk about nutrition, and then they'll go home and they'll see commercials and they'll see all this, and by the month later they still are confused because they're getting so many different ideas in their head that if I can just get people eating real food that'll spoil. Okay, that's a start.
Sure. Back to basics.
Yeah.
I've had that, not argument with my mom, but we've had that discussion. So she had leukemia 2 years ago. And basically her doctor came in and said, I don't care what you eat as long as you're eating. So after I learned, I've been through some of this and learned, and we've talked and researched stuff. And I've said, because she's still now, she had lost some weight for a while. She's gained some back, and I've said, you should maybe look at doing this. You'll probably not only feel better, you're getting older. Like there's no reason you shouldn't do this. And he said, so she went back in for a checkup, and he was like, nope, you can just keep eating whatever you want. You're fine. Like,
well, I think there's some confusion there because my father was going through cancer treatment as well, and part of the problem with those cancer treatments is that one, you're killing the entire body, and they have trouble eating. It kills their appetite. So any nutrition is better than no nutrition for a lot of those cancer patients. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Brad. But so when they say eat anything, they just want them eating at a certain point.
Yeah, and so if they've already become underweight and things, I think a keto diet is a problem for them because by nature, when you start, you'll lose weight. And so I think if the patient has weight to lose and is going through chemotherapy or cancer treatment, I think that's a great place you can start. But if they're already underweight, it's a very difficult thing. And so I think I want to make sure that, whoever listens to this doesn't just, go out on that regard. But it really needs to be formulated quite well to be successful. And so, a lot of it, also the nausea that comes with the chemotherapy and things, that if we can get them into ketosis now, that lessens some of those side effects, and maybe fasting around that time and making sure you're getting your liquids and your minerals may be the best thing for you. So now your cancer cells are more sensitized to the chemotherapy than anything else. And
I have to imagine, and I want to talk about one thing, then let's get on to the idea of the carnivore diet, that, you talk about a community of doctors come up with a standard practice in which now you'll start to see real changes in what's good nutrition, what isn't good nutrition. I can't help but to think that the insurance companies have a play in this. That when they have to see the data. If anybody's interested in data, it has to be insurance companies because there's billions of dollars on the line. And they have to see that, wait, we can reverse type 2 diabetes through diet. We're not going to shell out billions of dollars on treatment if we can just get their diet straight. Like, I can't help but believe that the insurance companies aren't playing a bigger role in getting this dogma changed. Like, hey, diet is a treatment. Diet is a way to start to reverse these things, and it's going to save everybody a ton of money.
I agree, but the good hard data research isn't there for them right now. I think that's why, and I think we've talked about this before, is there's a place in California called Virta Health out of San Francisco. They have made it their mission statement to reverse type 2 diabetes in 100 million people by 2025. And they've come out with, at first their 10-week data on putting people on basically keto diets. And the good thing about them is they have tracking, and so they can adjust medications. It's an online app thing where an average for the first 10 weeks, each patient will interface with a health coach or a doctor over 3 times a day. So they can rapidly reverse this in a safe environment. They've also had their 1-year data studied, which shows, I think, about 70% continue to have reduction in their medications or off medications. But not only that, now they also showed their 1-year data of the biomarkers of especially cardiovascular health. And in almost all categories, except for, I believe, LDL cholesterol, went down. LDL in a ketogenic diet will tend to go up because that's how you transfer your energy sources. And so that's why you have to take all of this into consideration, what your diet's like. But all of the markers, the inflammatory markers, the HDL went up, the triglycerides went down. All of these things showed at 1 year, they were markedly better. So I think their 2-year data will be out within the next few months. And they've extended their research to at least 5 years now. And so I think once we start seeing that, the insurance companies will have something to hang their hat on. You'll start seeing things change a little bit on top of this standard of care that we're looking to do.
What's funny is me being in the military, I still have to go in every year for my PHA, my physical health assessment, and they draw blood every year, and they see my cholesterol. My cholesterol is up, right? It's above their magic number, or whatever it happens to be. And they always want to put me on cholesterol meds. I say, no, you're not gonna. Well, look, your numbers are too high. Your numbers are too high. We have to do it. I'm like, look at the ratios, look at my triglycerides, look at my body fat.
Yeah.
But just getting them to look at that and to get past that, the first number, the big number, if it's over 200, that means you're going to have a heart attack here on the spot.
It is. And again, that goes back to the standard of care. And that's right now what the guidelines are saying. And it's going to take a lot to reverse that. And it'll take a lot of people yelling from the mountaintops about this is what's going on. And if we can slowly work more and more people into it, I think we'll see that, medicines have their role. There's no doubt about it. But your life choices are probably a bigger role than anything else.
Yeah, my doctor, speaking of PHA, I sent you this, I think in February, I went and did my year. I had been on keto for a while. I said, I'm going to go in because everybody's like, oh, you should get your numbers checked. And, some of my older friends were like, oh, this is so bad for you. So I sent him my numbers and he's like, man, your numbers are perfect. And I'll give my doctor credit there too. He said the same thing. He's like, they're out of, they're not where they should be, but you've never been healthier. You've lost a ton of weight. He said, everything looks great. He's like, keep doing what you're doing. I have zero concerns with everything. Good. So he was the one, and he asked, and I said, I'm doing keto. And so he was 100% supportive of what I was doing and the changes I had made. So
that's wonderful. If there's more people out there, especially in a town like this, I can't wait till we get more of them.
Oh yeah, that's cool. Let's take a quick break. You're listening to Treadmills and Tangents right here in The Answer, 94.5 FM, 1420 AM. We're going to come back and talk about the carnivore diet,
yum, yum,
which is delicious all the way around. When you walk into Mid-American Martial Arts, you're walking into more than punching and kicking. You're walking into a community, and that is what I think sets us apart from everybody else. We train anywhere from 4 years old, and we have students as old as in their 60s here. Our main programs are Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai kickboxing, Judo, as well as our strength and conditioning program, which is our Training for Warriors program. Our main goal is that when people leave here, they feel better about themselves. They're a little bit better as a person, they feel a little bit about their life, they feel better about their day. Now, everybody holds baggage, everybody has has stress, this is the place where they can come in and put all that away for a little bit and work on themselves. Yeah, do we hope they can defend themselves better? Sure. Do we hope they can punch and kick a little better? Absolutely. None of that matters if they don't feel good about themselves. And that's the main key. If they can walk out of here feeling good about themselves, feeling good about their life, then we've won that day.
Mid-America Martial Arts, located at 14951 Chandler Road in Millard. Give them a call at 402-813-1721 or visit midamericamartialarts.com.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Treadmills and Tangents, your health and wellness show right here on The Answer. We're going to talk carnivore diet. So Dr. Brad Winterstein just went out to the Lo-Carb Conference out in San Diego, in which a large number of the people there were straight carnivore. So carnivore diet being meat, that's it. Fatty cuts of meat is your main source of, or your only source of calories, ideally.
Ideally, I mean, especially when you're starting to get into it, a lot of people will do some dairy, some cheese, and maybe some full fat cream and like coffee or something like that.
So let's get one thing clear. Dr. Brad's not just someone talking out of his rear end. He's actually doing the carnivore diet yourself.
I am. Again, I don't prescribe it to anyone. I don't recommend it at this point in time because I haven't done it. And so I will talk to patients about things that I feel comfortable about because I've read about it, I've heard about it, I've done some research into it, and I've experienced it myself. And so I've done everything from potato fast to full-on several-day fasts, making sure you're doing things correctly, to the primal, to everything else. And so my wife and I both, starting this month, August 1st, we went full-on carnivore.
Awesome. And then being meat is your sole focus, fatty cuts of meat, and to ensure you get the right amounts of fats. And because of that, carnivore, people who do the carnivore diet tend to lean more towards red meat, correct?
Yeah, because again, if you want to do some of these things, the fat is going to be your primary fuel source. If you have too much protein, you'll end up having more gluconeogenesis and you have trouble maybe even losing weight type of thing. And there's other things, whether, if your ratios are off, there's something called mTOR and has some other biomarker problems that we can't really get into. But if you're not getting enough fat, you're going to feel more worn down and you're going to feel tired.
So I'm sure for a lot of people, this sounds contradictory. Okay, I know that to get in ketosis or to be on the continuum of ketosis, more towards that side of it, I reduce my carbs, I increase my fat, but I also know too much protein can kick me out. How do I not get too much protein on a carnivore diet?
Again, you're going with the fatter cuts of meat. Right now, I'm adding more cheese to my diet and some full fat cream to my coffee, which is delicious.
Absolutely delicious.
But the interesting thing is, the other thing is
cheese
and cream. But I'm tracking, and I've never been a big tracker of everything, and so I'm looking at my total grams of protein, my total grams of fat, and touch of carbs come into that, especially some of the bacon. Some might be a little cured with some sugar or something, although I try not to. I get maybe total of between 2 and 5 grams of sugar a day, or of carbs a day, I guess. And
wow, that's incredibly low.
Yeah,
it is. But again, I've been doing that for a long time, and so for me to go to 30 to 2 isn't a stretch.
Which for most ketogenic people, the rule of thumb is 20. 20 is like the number that seems to get thrown around a lot. 20 grams of carbs is kind of, you're going to be in ketosis. Now carnivore, you'll probably get much lower than that.
Yeah, it's almost called a zero carb diet, But yeah, I think the highest I've been in this 4 days now has been 7 grams, and that was I think some of the spices I had on the chicken were a little bit had some sugar in it, and so but other than that, I'm surprised at and I don't really care about calories, but the sheer low numbers of calories when I'm eating 3 eggs and 4 pieces of bacon and having a steak, that I'm still low calorie too. And so it's kind of hard to get what I would say my calorie goal is.
So these foods that on the surface look like they should be high-calorie foods actually end up not being.
They're high nutrition, not high calorie. And that's the difference. And when you're doing high dense nutritional foods, you're not as hungry. And so I eat when I'm hungry. I try to stay in a window of maybe 8 hours of eating. But I find it hard to get to a more than a 1,500 calorie diet. Now, I'm not a big guy. I'm, right now 151 pounds. And so it's not like I'm needing 3,000 calories, but for my activity level, I should be higher. But I'm not doing too bad with that. But I was really surprised when I started tracking it, though.
So you alluded to nutrient density, and that's the idea that you basically get more bang for your buck. You can eat a physical amount less food, but get more nutrients. And traditionally, I want to talk about this, that the dark leafy greens were considered nutrient-dense foods. Your kales, your spinaches, your chards, your rabs. There's no place in that in the carnivore diet. I don't want to scare people off that the dark leafy greens aren't good for you, but we had a side discussion that you had mentioned that just because it's in the food doesn't mean your body can get to it.
Yeah, it's called bioavailability. And so while you have maybe more micronutrients than, say, potassium or zinc or some of these other copper things in some of the green leafy vegetables, how well are you getting to those? And they did talk about a study, and I can't remember when it was published about it, but how the amount of bioavailable things in vegetables is probably less than, say, your meats. And again, I don't want to say this is something I'm trying. I think green leafy vegetables in a keto diet is fine, but as a carnivore, I think it's just a little different.
Well, we do know there are certain vegetables that have to be cooked to allow that bioavailability to happen. Like we know potatoes, like eating raw potatoes, our body essentially can't digest them. We get nothing out of it. Mm-hmm. Once you cook the potato, then the starches are released, and we do get, the nutritional value. Nutritional value being relative in that case.
Exactly.
But so, essentially we eat a lot of vegetables that we may not be getting anything out of them.
No, and maybe our gut flora which will break it down and do some of those other things, which may help, but it may help with, flatulence, and it may help with, other problems that, may be concerning. And so just because it's in it doesn't mean you're absorbing it.
Sure. So let's get to the end game. What are we seeing? You have a nurse practitioner, whose life essentially was turned around by going to a carnivore diet. What are we seeing? Like, we know, hey, the ketogenic diet, we're starting to see people reverse type 2 diabetes. We're starting to see people lose tremendous amounts of weight. We got somebody in the room who's done. We've had several people in our own gym at Mid-American Martial Arts lose tons of weight getting towards the ketogenic diet. What are we seeing out of the carnivore diet?
I think it's still in its infancy. I think everything is still just being looked at, but I think a lot of people with even a little bit more metabolic derangements tend to, maybe if they're really strict keto and still having some issues, whether that be menstrual issues or weight issues or some sleep issues too, that going a strict carnivore tends to improve those even more. And it's amazing how sensitive they can be to these green leafy vegetables or anything like that.
So essentially, you have to experiment a little bit. And, like you said, you have someone in your office who went on a carnivore diet who, as a female, wasn't having regular periods, goes on a carnivore diet, and essentially starts once again. Do you think that's just more a matter of she finally got rid of foods that she may have been overly sensitive to, maybe had some allergic reactions to on a smaller scale that was causing her body to now, other processes weren't working because of...
No, I think that's exactly what it is for her. And I think a lot of people will say that. I mean, we saw a lady that was at the conference that runs one of the websites that we follow called Zeroing In on Health, I believe it's called. It's a zero carb website that she's been doing it for 9 years. And, Has she lost a ton of weight? No, but she's healthier than she's ever been. She's feeling good, and just her overall outlook on life has been better once she got rid of those. And so people do and can, respond differently to different substances. And I think that's what it is. It's all about experiencing yourself and knowing what you feel like. And unless you've tried it, you don't know. And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So I know one of the biggest fears with eating a lot of meat is cancer. And there's research out there that says eating large amounts of red meat increases the likelihood of cancer or makes you more susceptible to cancer. And I'm sure a lot of people who advocate the vegan diet, which by no means am I, I'll tease vegans, I'll tease, vegetarians that they're not real people, or it happens to be, right? But that's a genuine concern. And a lot of times people will gravitate towards those diets because cancer is a big fear with eating a lot of meat, especially red meat.
Yeah. And that kind of comes back to what I said. I think that there's a process in our bodies called mTOR that does promote cancer. And protein seems to be the one that stimulates mTOR a little bit more. And I think that is definitely probably why, I think the amount of protein you get, you can't really be over 1.5 grams per kilogram a day. I think that's the most. But the other way to reduce your mTOR is intermittent fasting. And so you limit the amount of time you're eating. And so if you're going to be over that, I think it's your body's very sensitive into how often you eat and how long throughout the day you eat. And so if you're not continuously stimulating it, it's probably not as big as risk. If you're worried about it, you bring your grams per kilogram down to maybe 1 if you're able to maintain muscle mass.
Let's put that in English for everybody. We're talking about a gram per pound, give or take. Ish, is that right? 1.5?
1.5 would be about a gram per pound.
Right. Which, that's a lot of protein.
It is.
For someone like me, that's, 225, 230 grams of protein. That's a lot of chicken, a lot of beef you got to put down to get that much protein. Yeah. A lot of protein shakes you got to put down.
Yeah, and that's the thing is part of it is if you're getting your higher fat cuts, you'll also get the good fat with it. And again, people will roll their eyes at me and say, well, beef isn't necessarily good fat, but it's natural fat. Don't tell me that, quote, vegetable oil, which is really not vegetables, it's seed oil, is a natural fat, which shown all the polyunsaturated fats, for the most part, have caused a lot of some issues too. And so that was the other thing I took away from this is, natural fats, coconut oil, if you're going to do it, butter, grass-fed butter.
Yes, butter.
Those types of things.
Butter makes it better.
Because that's how you're going to get your K2 vitamins and stuff. And so those are the things that, I recommend and have seen good success with.
Now, one thing you had mentioned being out at the conference is that people on the carnivore diet, things like chicken and pork tend to start to not settle well with them. And the fattier meats, actually, they feel better.
Yeah, again, it goes back to fat content. And the interesting thing, one of the gentlemen who talked, he's a ruminant biologist, and so he studies ruminants and things, and
I have no idea what that is.
That's cows, and that's deer, and that's the ruminant animals.
I have learned today.
I have too.
And so, but he says,
I just think it sounds tasty. I'll call it whatever.
As far as the ruminants go, his line is, as ruminants would say, that we eat grass so you don't have to.
I like it.
That's almost what was the thing?
We posted something today. We posted a meme today, had a bunch of steaks, and it said, I saw this cow eating your grass, so I killed it for you.
Yeah. I saw that.
You're welcome.
Yes, exactly. And so he had a slide that showed that, as far as the types of fats, and again, we've talked before about omega-3s and omega-6s and whether you should get grass-fed beef versus regular beef. In the grand scheme of things, when you look at the amount of the percent of fats, whether it be omega-6s or omega-3s, in regular grain-finished cattle or beef, The omega-6, omega-3 is a lot less than, say, your free-range chicken or your pork shoulder. You have a lot more omega-6s in that than you will in grain finished.
Even a grain finished grain finished beef is better than some chickens and porks.
Exactly. Now, again, I mean, these are chicken thighs, which will have skin and a little bit more fat than, say, a chicken breast, which, again, what we're looking for in a carnivore type diet is more fat. And so you need those fattier cuts.
Eat the skin is what
he's saying. Eat the skin,
Oh, yeah.
exactly.
Delish.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so those types of things do matter over time. So his point was, if you can afford it and you like grass-fed, great, get it. If you don't, it's probably more important just to get the good meat, and if you're cooking with some type of oil, making sure that it's a good oil.
How does fish play into all this?
Fish, again, fattier fish, salmon, those types of things are going to be better, but, you know, having a piece of lobster dipped in butter again isn't probably too far off.
So I find it funny. I go back to, I like using bodybuilding as an example because bodybuilding kind of has fallen out of vogue in the last few years because, you know.
CrossFit.
Well, yeah, it is what it is. But I always go back to bodybuilders have had this nutrition thing licked for a long, long time. And there was an interview with Kevin Levrone. So if you don't know who he is, huge, successful bodybuilder. All through the 90s, you know, the guy that, you know, was a perennial favorite in the bodybuilding competitions, and he's been retired. He actually just made a comeback and did very well, but in his retirement years, a few years ago, they were interviewing him, and they were talking about the state of bodybuilding and how he felt that the current bodybuilders aren't in quote-unquote shape, and he made a comment. He goes, you know, they're just not willing to sacrifice. They're just not willing to eat fish in the weeks leading up. And eat only fish in the weeks leading up to the competition. And the point being, fish, bodybuilders are known for a long time. Fish, high in protein, will lean you out. Mm-hmm. We'll get you, we'll pull all that extra fat off your body. It's like, man, bodybuilders have known this for forever.
But they're probably talking about lean fish in that regard, which is going to get your protein, lower fats. Again, that will shred you out. It's lower
cod is
carb.
Usually their go-to fish.
And so in my thinking of you talking about that back in the day, but those types, they were always eating multiple meals. They're trying to stimulate their insulin for gains and things like that. At this conference, there's a group that came and talked called Keto Gains, where they've basically a guy's lost a little over 100 pounds and put on a ton of muscle, going pure ketosis. But he also says, you know, in this realm, what he's trying to do is for bodybuilding. If he's out of ketosis for, you know, 45 minutes to 2 hours, what's the difference? You know, so they're doing this bodybuilding and they look good. I mean, they're big boys on a ketogenic type diet, but not always in ketosis.
That's more the cyclic ketosis that we've talked about, in which they do want to take advantage of that insulin response because we know insulin is very anabolic and helps build muscle.
Exactly.
So, which to me, that now kind of brings back the concept of nutrient timing, which has been talked about a lot. It was very popular in the early 90s when the book came out. What was the name of the book? Nutrient Timing. It was, everybody had the book, and I'm brain dumping again. But then we started to realize, hey, maybe nutrient timing isn't as critical. But now it might be coming back around that, hey, when can we take advantage of this insulin response and what foods trigger that for short windows?
Exactly. And these guys have it down to a science. And there was some other gentlemen out of Tampa that have a athletic training facility there for a lot of people that actually Randy Moss is there working with now, that do more of a ketogenic approach and not only doing athletic training, but also doing neurogenic and longevity studies out of this place in Tampa as well.
Awesome. Well, we're running out of time, guys. I'm going to give Dr. Brad a final say. If you were to tell somebody, you know, who's struggling with their weight, struggling with diabetes, you know, what, if you're going to give them a piece of advice, what would it be? I mean, we've thrown out tons of terms. You throw out ketosis, ketogenic diet, we've thrown carnivore, and their heads are probably about to explode right now, and rightfully so. If you're going to tell them, if you're going to dumb this down, what would you tell them?
Again, it all depends on where it's coming from. And so I'm not giving individual medical advice. It really becomes, where are you starting from? You need to experiment on yourself on how you feel, and you have to be realistic. If you're coming from eating anything, you can't go carnivore. You just have to start lowering your carbohydrates, eating real foods, getting out and moving. Those types of things are where you're going to start. Then, once you kind of get that, now you can start experimenting with even lower carbohydrates, or maybe getting into ketosis and things like that. But jumping from a standard American diet to even ketosis or carnivore will probably be good in the long run, but the short term you'll feel worse. You won't see these amazing things right away. So a step-by-step process, and just listen to your body is the best thing I can say.
Don't go whole hog and get discouraged because, man, I felt like crap for being on that for 3 days, and then go back and revert back to where you were.
Well, I feel, just even eliminating 20 grams of carbs a day, for me, I'm struggling, and so it definitely is a period where right now I'm taking in a lot more salt. I'm taking in a lot more magnesium. And you have to adjust.
So start small, go from there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Barrett, thanks for spending some time with us today. I love picking your brain, and someone being on the front lines of all this and going to the conferences. It's great to have in our wheelhouse over at the gym. And, we kind of live vicariously through you in some cases, going to those conferences, which is awesome. But, if we can help a couple of people live a little longer, it's great, And if somebody's listening and you have questions, give us a call, reach out to us on our Facebook or through our website. Give us a call. We'll be happy to answer any questions or get you in touch with the right people and get you, help your happier life here in the Big O. Outside that, guys, have a good weekend. We'll see you next week.
Tune in each Saturday morning with fun banter on what it takes to live a healthier, happier, and more vibrant life in the Big O. Treadmills and Tangents with Coach Aaron Cerrone and his army of wellness warriors.